Welcome to the Agile Wire, where professional Scrum trainers Jeff Boobles and Jeff Molesky discuss Agile topics. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Boobles and Jeff Molesky.
And we are recording. All right, Mr. Boobles, kick us off, man.
All right, so this week on the Agile Wire, we've got a number of people. We have the largest number of guests we've ever had on the Agile Wire. We have a bunch of different people from the Agile Online Summit, which is coming up here quickly. And so why don't we just go around our virtual room here and do some introductions. Tom, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I want to thank Jeff for bringing us on here. I am Tom Hendrickson, the founder of the Agile Online Summit. And I enjoy having conversations with people like Jeff and Jeff. We've met at conventions and conferences a few years ago, and it's always good to talk to them. But I enjoy just being in this space.
Casey, do you want to go next?
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm Casey Kremenek, and I'm a track chair for implementing Agile practices, stories in the wild, also helping with a bit of the design on the conference, and really excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. How about Isaac? You want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I'm Isaac Garcia. I'm an Agile coach, and I'm the track chair for the retrospectives track, where we're going to be talking about the value of retrospectives and even sharing some ideas on how to make them more effective and interesting. So I'm really happy to be here and be a part of this conversation.
All right, and we have Alicia.
Yeah, last but not least, Alicia McLean, Enterprise Agile Coach. I am the track chair for facilitation, diversity, and inclusion. And in that track, we'll be talking about the importance of facilitation as a very serious and important competency for Agile coaches at all levels. So I'm glad to be here.
All right. So question just to kind of get started here. So we have a bunch of track chairs. We have this Agile Online Summit, brings people from across the Agile community together, and there's tons of great content year after year. But if you personally could interview one person in the Agile community, who would it be and why? I know, Tom, what do you think? Who would it be for you? You've interviewed a lot of people.
Yeah,
but,
that's a good question.
Who would you pick?
I guess as I think about that, doing the summit, and this is one of the main reasons why I started this is because I wasn't able to go, years ago. So this is the 5th year we've done it. Wanted to go to some of the biggest events and see all the great, people like, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like people like Mike Cohn or Esther Derby or some of those people, that are our leaders and in this space, and wanting to talk to them. So those would be some of the people I would want to talk to. And that's why, why I'm here and why I do this.
Okay. What do you think, Casey? Who would you pick?
Whoa. Tom, that was a non-answer. Okay. So who would that person be?
Well, you gave us two. We were going to ask you to prioritization.
I said Mike Cohn.
You said Mike. Okay.
So
if that's your
I'll
answer,
say
cool. But I'm not going to let you scroll out of these answers.
I was able to talk to Mary and Tom Popendiek. I think it was last year for the Agile Online Summit, and that was one of the things where that was one of those moments where when you interview somebody, you don't want to be like, wow, this is really cool, but it was one of those times where I'm like, this is awesome. I can't believe I could do this.
Casey, who's the one person you pick? We're not gonna let anyone else skate by with two answers. You get one.
Just one? Okay. I think I would pick Lisa Atkins. Just because anytime I've had an opportunity to work with her one-on-one, like just the way that she coaches and always has the exact right question and knows the right thing to say, like she's just an awesome, inspiring coach. So I would pick her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all. She definitely is. How about you, Isaac? Who would you pick?
This is going to sound super lame following Casey's answer, but actually it would be, for me, Lisa Atkins, for a little bit of a different reason. So when I got started in my Agile journey, I took a coaching Agile teams class with Lisa, and it was incredible. It opened my eyes to it's more than just being a Scrum master, right? That you could actually be an Agile coach. And during that session, she coached me. Like it was a training session. And so she said, we need to volunteer. So I got to sit there and get coached by her. And I just remember thinking, this is magic. Like what I'm seeing here, the way she's running a room, the way she's running a training, the way she's coaching, this is magical. I can't fathom this. And so I'd really love to sit down with her now, years into my practice, and just kind of reconnect a little more as peers and not as someone who knows nothing with the great master, and to see how far I've come and to also glean some more from her wisdom. So Lisa Atkins as well, but for a little bit of different reasons from Casey.
We should maybe reach out and see if we can get an interview with her for the summit.
We should.
Oh, what a great idea. Yeah, I want to say the same, but I'll pick another person. So I'll go from if I knew then what I know now. So I got training from Ken Schwaber and Mike Cohn back in 2006. This was for my product owner, but I knew nothing and I didn't know anything about anything. And so I think if I could go back in time and pull my knowledge forward, I'd like to sit both of them down again and from the perspective that and the lens that I have today, interview both of them and see how far all of it has come, my skill as well as the whole community.
Casey, wanted to jump in with something you had said earlier about that, and I can't remember if it was before we started recording or after, so forgive me, but the frustration with people equating agility to Scrum, okay? Jeff and I are Scrum people. I'm not going to lie there. We're both PSTs, and we see that all the time as well. But help me understand your perspective. Like, why is that necessarily such a bad thing? Scrum's awesome. Like, what's the harm?
No, and Scrum is awesome when it makes sense, right? And it doesn't make sense everywhere. And I think the
You
frustration.
had me at Scrum is awesome. Okay, you could have just
Stop.
cut it off. No, I'm sorry. Keep going.
It's when you get into looking at different types of teams that aren't building something new or supporting one product like infrastructure, shared services, HR. Sometimes Scrum can be a bit heavy and not help the team achieve their goals of maybe their main goal is um, cycle time improvements or throughput or less context switching. And so looking at things like lean practices rather than Scrum can be helpful, especially if they're ticket based teams, right? It's hard to plan 2 week sprints when you're getting tickets. And so I see frequently when I come into an organization, they've used Scrum across all teams and it isn't working. And so therefore people are like, Agile doesn't work for me. And I think that's because we make a mistake by prescribing the wrong framework and the wrong practices for them.
Yeah, I can go back to experience with one organization I was working with where they were trying to use Scrum like in the mailroom, in different places where we're doing something that's very, filing claims, something that's very repeatable, right? Like we've done this thing before. We do steps 1 through 50 and that's how this works. And so like you said, lean practices work really well there. I know I always talk with clients about like, well, where we have more unknowns and knowns, more in that complex space from requirements, technology, people, Scrum's great there. When, like you said, I just want to iterate, like when we can't plan to our horizon, even a week or a day, maybe we need to have something different that's more continuous planning. And then maybe we need to take some things from Scrum, but maybe we need to take a little bit more from Kanban, right? Or something else. Like there's multiple practices depending on your context. So yeah, that's great. But there's those multiple avenues. And I think sometimes people just, they equate Scrum to Agile. That's a very common thing that's out there. Anybody else see anything like this before? Like when they're seeing teams trying to use Scrum in a context that maybe it doesn't quite work?
So I heard something different. I heard Casey say Agile equals Scrum. And then Jeff said agility equals Scrum. And I would offer that Agile, agility, and Scrum are all three conversations to have with the client because, Agile oftentimes means, for many people means frameworks, right? Whereas agility can mean something totally, more complex, broader. And so having that conversation because the frameworks are the tools to get the agility, right? So what does all that mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll add into what Alicia was saying in that, when we're talking about previous experience, a company I was at, we had a big Agile effort to try to roll out Agile. And when I got involved, I quickly realized that people were using Scrum and Agile interchangeably. And I learned this actually in some of my Lisa Atkins training, but words matter. Right. And it's really key to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what you mean when you say it. And so there was some confusion in this attempted Agile rollout because people were simply saying Agile, Scrum, and honestly, they were mixing them 50% of the time. It was a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So there was no real clear definition. And if you ever pressed anybody, they would, of course, explain the framework, which is what Alicia was saying. And so I think words really do matter. And you got to be careful not to lose the meaning of what you're trying to say, because if you do that, you can cause confusion. You can make someone get lost if they go, well, I'm going to go look that up. And then, wait, no, that's not what I thought it was. So it's better to make sure you have clear words. And as a person involved in a transformation, you want to help own those words, right? You want to make sure that the right words mean the right things and not just let them take on whatever flavor they do in the wild.
So what are some of those danger words that are coming up there, Isaac, that you're talking about? Are there any red flags that when you hear them that you're like, ooh, maybe we should dive a little bit deeper or double click onto that one and find out what we're thinking there?
That's a great question. And so I think obviously Agile and Scrum are ones that I see misused maybe the most, and Agile being, I think, the wild card that gets thrown around. And when you start seeing, this is an Agile lunch, we're going to have an Agile budget, we're going to do an Agile, and people are just adding Agile to the front of it to show that they're doing something different or being trendy with the times. I think you get this degrading scale of it gets worse and worse and worse because it just becomes this cool tagline. And so I would say anything that gets the prefix or the suffix of Agile, you're probably in trouble there. And then honestly, rather than give you a specific example of watch out for this word, really listen closely to when people use words that have meanings in whatever framework you're in, whether it's Scrum, Kanban, Lean, whatever kind of work you're doing. Watch out for someone who cites a word that is defined in the framework or in the system or in the approach, and then it ends up pointing to something else, right? So if someone says, oh yeah, we have retrospectives, they're 10 minutes at the end of every cycle, be like, well, wait a second, retrospectives are 10 minutes. Or at one time I had a Scrum Master say, yes, we do retrospectives every sprint. And I said, that's wonderful. Tell me about that. And they said, yep, I send out an email to the team, and sometimes I get responses, sometimes I don't. And my brain exploded a little bit as I realized, oh, I have another one for you. It's not so much a word as a concept. Certifications. I've been in many a company where I come in, here I am, a Scrum Master or an Agile coach, and they say, now we're bringing you in, but we've already got lots of certified Scrum Masters, just tons of them. They're all certified, down the line. We all know Scrum. And then you sit and have a 5-minute conversation and go, I don't think Scrum means what you think it means. And where did you get your certificate? Oh, from Scrum Certificates, cheap and really quick and fast.com. Where did you get your Scrum certificate from? So I'd watch out for certifications and Agile being transposed on anything. I think those get taken a little too freely.
And we have those managers who get product owner certifications, and then they are magically product owners, right?
that is very loaded. So it's like the pin in the grenade is estimation. That's one of those words that, let's face it, when you come to an organization, you're coming into a system. It's like going to a country, and there's a language in here. And to Isaac's point, what is the language they're using? How do I meet them where they are? But then also help them understand what does this language mean so that they can use it in a way where they're not confusing each other. But estimation is just one of those ones that's so loaded, and it can have all kinds of different meanings depending on the system that you're in.
Yeah, I think that one of the common patterns that I see across organizations is they don't change anything, but they just rename everything using Scrum terms, Kanban terms, other things like that. And so whenever you hear people start to use those terms, I think asking that next question, so tell me about how that happens, like you were talking about, Isaac, like tell me about your retrospectives that you're doing. Tell me about, oh, you're doing Scrum? Well, tell me, what does that look like for you? And I've had times where it's like, they think they're doing Scrum, but they're doing daily Scrums and that's it. That they don't do anything else. Yeah. And they think it's Scrum. And so there's a lot of people that talk past each other inside our community, and people maybe just outside the community. I think they understand Agile, and so I think we got to be a bridge. We can't just reject that, right? We got to pull people together. How do you think the summit helps with that? Like bridging the gaps that people have out there inside of the Agile community, and really just inside of organizations that are trying to be more responsive to change.
I was going to say it's so important to me, and being around other people who really kind of get the language, they get the approach, they get the frameworks, they get the mindset. for me, the Agile Online Summit is one of many opportunities to connect with those type of people, which helps me straighten out and reinforce my own thinking. If you were today to jump into a large company and they were kind of in their own little bubble, their own world, to them, Scrum just means the daily Scrum, right? You may feel a bit like an alien being the one person speaking up and saying, wait, no, it's different. But when you're around people like at the Agile Online Summit and you hear great teachers and you're connected to community, then you can absolutely get the benefit of, no, I'm bringing to you something that's thought generally, not just my thought. So I think that keeping our minds in sync is key, as we're all learning, right? But that's what the summit does for me. Sorry, Tom, I'll kick it back over to you.
Yeah, I guess I just plus one on what you said there, Isaac, but also too, I think it's so good to see where other people are struggling. At the end of the day, I think a lot of us all deal with, how hard change is in the organizations we work with. And I think, like you said, Isaac, it's good to have a little support, but then too, to get some people who have some fresh ideas about how to try things like Alicia talks about facilitation, how important that is in organizations. And how they need to know that it is important. Because a lot of times I've been in organizations where, I talk to them about facilitation and they kind of look at me like, what are you talking about? And some of those skills and how important they are that people at the summit really value and can kind of help us reinforce.
And I think this upcoming summit is great for that because of the way we've designed the flow of it too. So we're using a shu ha ri theme to the event, and so you'll get all different types of levels of information. So wherever you're at in your agile journey or wherever your knowledge gaps might be, I think there's an opportunity in every track and every day to learn something new.
So I'm kind of a cynical person. So let me just go ahead and throw out the question. What Agile buzzwords can we expect to hear at this year's conference? And I'm not just picking on the Agile Online Summit, okay? We've been around the block a little bit. We know those Agile buzzwords that seem to come up every year, and that's the big hot topic that everybody's talking about here. What might I expect to hear at this year's Agile Online Summit?
I was peeking through some of the submissions before the podcast here today, and I saw a lot of this anti-pattern, anti-fragile sort of buzzwords in there. So you can probably expect to hear that.
I never knew you were cynical, Jeff.
I am 100% the cynical co-host here on the Agile Wire. I'm just the guy who cusses and is always negative Nancy about things. Jeff is Mr. Positivity.
Yeah, somebody's got to challenge the status quo and challenge everybody. And even if he agrees with somebody, he'll challenge you. So somebody's got to be that person. But what other buzzwords? Like in past years, I'm thinking, outputs. Do we want outcomes versus outputs? Right? We had a lot of conversations about that. I'm trying to think of some products over projects.
Radical candor.
Yeah, radical candor maybe was one in the past. Yeah.
And then a lot with intent-based leadership when that kind of hit the bookshelf. Generally, there's those hot topic books that are coming out, and then they cause a little bit of ripples that are going on. So just kind of curious if anything has kind of crossed your radar. I think the other one kind of generically, but the DevOps, right? Get me some of that DevOps. Need to get some of that around here, right? Just stop at the local Walmart, pick some up, on your way home.
They have it at Staples now. You can just buy it on the shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just bring in a coupon and you get 3 for 1.
Yeah. When you buy the Agile, you get that as an add-on.
I was just going to say, I didn't see a whole lot of any sort of themed submissions that made the list of things that we're going to interview or discuss that were based on books that I've seen come out recently. So I think that's good. I think there's a lot of original thinking that I'm seeing. And so I'm pretty excited about that.
I noticed in my track that I had 3 submissions that were about psychological safety. I don't know that that's necessarily a buzzword. What that says for me is that there's still a need for that and a concern about that people are still thinking about it, and it is something that people want to find new and novel ways to either bring about or to create with their teams.
Yeah, I'll add in there. I think too, with what Casey was saying about anti-fragile, I think that we're seeing, and it's part of our conversation now post COVID, right? We're seeing remote work a lot, and we're also seeing the future of work, right? What do hybrid teams look like, or what does go back to office look like, or what if we're just going to stay remote? So I think you see in the anti-fragile and in some of the other talks that we'll have, that unsureness of what the future will look like. We're not just saying, yeah, it's going to be pretty much the same as the last few. We've had this large scale event, this worldwide event that has changed the way we think about some pretty basic things. And how is that going to impact us as agilists, as change agents? What impact does that have on the way we show up for our clients or for the industry? So I think you'll see some of that sprinkled throughout, tied in a lot with the anti-fragile, as Casey mentioned, but there's some other ones. We have a whole track on the future of work. What comes next? Where do we go from here?
That's an interesting topic. I'd like to hear what everyone's opinion is on what is the future of work.
Well, I'll definitely say that to just piggyback on what Isaac just said is the future of work is right in front of us, right? And this is where facilitation comes in. There's a couple of people that are in the track that I have that are talking about what are these new and novel ways to bring people together when we are in a remote space, or when we've got half of the people remote and half of the people, um, in the same room together. So 2020 caused us to really sort of snap out of it and realize that work can still happen even though we're not all sitting in the same office together. And so this whole track is going to be about what's the next generation of bringing people together when we're not all in the same place.
Yeah. I'll say, I think when I think about the future of work, I think it's going to be defined. You mentioned earlier radical candor. I'm going to say, we'll coin a new phrase, radical choice. I really think that so much of what work is going to look like is going to be based on the choice of the employee. And we're already seeing so many people moving from whatever their career maybe was, maybe resetting. We're seeing a global marketplace open up. We're seeing companies that used to only hire locally being able to hire talent from across the US or the world. And so I see a shift where companies are going to have to respect and offer those choices to the employees, because that's going to become the new norm. Everyone got used to being able to say, right, I can work from home, or I can work in a different mode than maybe I used to. And so I think we're going to see some radical choice options and responses. And honestly, I don't know how a company that says, we're the boss, you show up and work only the way we say, and we don't care what any other company is doing, those companies aren't going to have employees, right? In the future, they've got to provide some level of choice, along with, of course, salary and benefits and all the other things that companies today provide. So I think choice is going to be important.
Yeah, I mean, top talent is going to want to go where they have freedom, right? We know from Daniel Pink the three things that motivate people: purpose, autonomy, mastery. People that can do well with that environment are going to go find the companies that are going to offer that to them. So I 100% agree. So if you're in an organization that's trying to control and maybe has very traditional mindset, they're going to struggle to find the most talented people. I think that's just going to be the reality.
You want to talk about a highly mobile workforce, right? I can work for any company anywhere on the planet from my little town, wherever I am in the world. I can go take a vacation and work for any company anywhere in the world. Highly mobile, it doesn't do that justice, right? That is an incredible amount of freedom that I have. Where I work is different from where the work gets done. It's incredible. It's changing the way we think.
And look at the amount of change that is part of the future of work. And I think us as Agilists have a benefit here because we can help people through those changes, and we can help to build that future of work, with organizations and help them to optimize in this very volatile world, that is consistently changing. So I think we're going to just keep seeing a ton of change because, like you said, like everything is different now. There's so many opportunities to get different to tap into different talent pools, to give people a little bit more autonomy over what they're working on and how they're working. And I think for some smaller organizations, that means that they're able to get maybe more business than they were before, as well as things move virtually. And the power of technology is growing so fast, and the focus on the environment and sustainability and things like that become more important. And so I just think we're in for a lot of change, and I think we're in a key position to help the world grow into that.
I think as Agilists, like, we are uniquely positioned to help the world deal with this kind of level of uncertainty. We've done it for a long period of time in person, but now we're doing it remote. But we are uniquely positioned to help facilitate in different ways, to show up in different ways, and to help the world deal with this level of uncertainty. Like, I don't know. What are other people's thoughts on that? Like, I know I'm in this pretty deep, and I'm probably a little biased. Maybe this whole room is pretty biased, but like, do you think that we as Agiles have a potential to maybe change the way the world works, or at least give an example of how it can?
Well, I'll jump in there. I completely agree with you. I think we are primed to be key players in designing this future for the very reason that for the past 10, 15 years, the people who have kind of become our leading agilists have been honing a set of tools to help deal with change, right? We talk about anti-fragile. We've been studying and playing in that area of what if change came? How do you navigate large scale shifts in thinking, right? That's what we do. That's our space. And so as you have the change on the leadership side, how do we do business differently? They're going to need help navigating and implementing those changes. And as you have changes on the people side, right? The employees. One of the things that I think about as an agilist and as an agile coach, you've got a large group of people who are going to have to show up to work very differently while dealing with a different world outside their front door for a period of time, right? There's the toilet paper shortage. They had to do that and do work at the same time. So how do you help that person recognize it's and homeschool and all the other challenges? How do you help them navigate the changing world, the changing workplace, the changing expectations on them as workers, right? And that's where, as an agile coach, that's right in my bailiwick. That's right where I'm comfortable saying, let's look at what you're experiencing. Let's look at current state. Let's look at future state. And let's chart a path, not a hard line, but a learning path, a journey from here towards there. And let's inspect and adapt as we go. Those are key skills that every level of business is going to need critically as we move into a more unstable world. We have more black swans and anti-fragile thinking coming into play. We're going to need that more and more and more, those people to help guide and iterate and implement some of these tools and these ideas.
I would agree with that. And frankly, I think this is why the next frontier for me personally is leadership and emotional agility, because, you cannot deal with all of this until you get your mind right. Right. So I don't care about the frameworks. I don't care about any of that. When you're running around looking for toilet paper and homeschooling kids and trying to navigate all the changes that's happening, you have got to get your mind right. And so that's my next frontier is leadership and emotional agility. And it starts in that professional coaching wedge. If you're talking about agile coaching and a competency, it's in that professional coaching wedge and working with people around positive intelligence and mental fitness, which is my platform for this next generation of agility.
Yeah, that one's become really prevalent, I think. One of the things that I don't know, I'm getting into more and more is the integral model and how I show up at work using that. And so that I one is one that you're describing there, Alicia, where it's like, how am I becoming stronger as a person? How am I reflecting as a person? What am I doing so that I'm ready to show up at work every single day? And I think too often people don't think about that. They let everything else pile on top of it and they don't take care of themselves, and then everything comes crashing down. So so important. So I think that's a great area to focus on. And, we all probably need that reminder of the think about how we're showing up and what are we doing for ourselves every single day.
Yeah. And Jeff, let me add on to that something that's been, I guess, percolating in my mind and in the community a good bit in some recent things we've experienced. The importance of self-care for agile coaches, because I totally agree with what you have said, and I coach people. Let's find where you are and let's make sure you're taking care of yourself and you've got sustainable pace and you've got these things built in, you're showing up as your full self. One thing we've discovered oddly, paradoxically, is that often Agile coaches, Scrum masters, because we're doing it to serve other people, are the worst at sometimes having self-care. And so this is a theme, like I said, I've seen bubbling to the surface, but especially for your audience, it's so important to establish the same things you're recommending to others. Oh, it's a crazy, chaotic time. Here, let me help you take care of yourself. You've either got to have a coach who's helping you, which I highly recommend to have self-care, or you need to be taking your own medicine and performing self-care, because that's something that we can preach pretty loud, but then we can forget that we also, if we don't put our oxygen mask on first, we're not going to be able to help too many people as the plane's depressurizing. So we need that as much, if not more, than the people we're helping. So as the world is still chaotic, and as you're a Scrum Master, an Agile coach, a whoever, if you're looking to serve people, make sure you're also taking care of yourself, because a short-term service from you burn out after 1 or 2 years, isn't going to help as much as if you had a sustainable pace, you took care of yourself, and you were able to serve people for 50 years. That's more significant. And so that's what we want to be encouraging for all Agile coaches, Scrum Masters. Be thinking about, be aware of what it takes to keep yourself at the top of your game.
How do you do that? How do the people on this call do that? Like, how do you take care of yourself?
I would love to answer that and give you the 3-step process. I think for me, it's recognizing how far I get from what I tell other people. And sometimes I have to step back and say, what would I tell someone in my exact situation if I was coaching and helping them? One thing that has helped me significantly is getting a coach myself, getting someone I talk to regularly who asks me the same questions, that I know these questions. When they ask me, I say, yeah, that makes sense. But have I answered it for myself? No. But when I answer it for them, I realize, wow, I'm far from where I should be. So I would say, listen to yourself, see how far you are from what you're telling others. And I would really say, get a coach are two of the things that have really helped me. And I'd love to hear things that have helped anyone else, because I'm still learning. I don't have this down. I still have a ways to go.
Oh, I was just going to say that I completely agree. Getting a coach is so vital. I have multiple peer coaches, and this is either from my coaching program or peer relationships, but I speak to a coach weekly. So I think having a coach is super important. I think practices like mindfulness are important. Mindfulness is really important to help stop the chatter that's going on, the negative messages that are happening, and it's just a feature of being human. You just have to know how to mitigate that. And so, mindfulness practices. I'm a big Peloton fan. I use the Peloton app, so I use Peloton yoga. Yoga anywhere, so I can stand up right here in my RV and do yoga on the daily. So those are the things that I do for self-care, and I just think that it's an important practice, and I think it's an important self-commitment.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that, being aware of where you're at is really important. So mindfulness can help. I frequently revisit my coaching stance and see if I'm actually in it and make sure that I'm intentional with how I want to show up and making sure that I'm checking myself on that. I also frequently do a motivation check. So I'll kind of move like categories around it, like what's motivating to me right now versus what's demotivating. And then I'll compare the work that I'm doing and see where it's at in the scale, right? And am I working on things that are motivating or demotivating, and see how I can make that shift. I spent a long time in my career working hard, and not doing myself any good, and I think not doing my clients very much good either. I was taking on too much, trying to save the world or whatever, but I found that, balance is really important, and being very self-aware is helpful.
When I take care of myself, I think about three things. I think about spiritually, physically, and mentally. What am I doing? And I need to do something every single day for each one of those. And I start in the morning. So I get up early, because if I put it off after I start my day, I won't do it. Family life, something gets in the way. And so I have to do it in the morning, and I have to be intentional about those three things and do them every single day. So that'd be my advice, is like, figure out when it works for you, figure out how you're going to do it, and make sure that it covers the different aspects that you need to take care of for yourself. Tom, what about you? What do you do?
I think one of the things that I've learned to do is try to do like kind of there's the concept of doing like a shutdown A lot of people have talked about this, but like a shutdown complete, like you empty what you're going to do. Like for instance, like try to set up my day for tomorrow. And then at the end of the day, kind of shut down things. Some people even say, okay, do a shutdown, say shutdown or something to signal. But once you put that down, that you turn off your computer and then like your phone to put that away and try to engage with people. That's one thing I've think is helpful is if you're talking to somebody, sometimes you'll see somebody and you're talking to them and they're like this. It's like, that conversation is not going to be, you're not present, they're not present. So that's one of the things I try to be present in the conversation, but then two, try to have that shutdown where I have that time, kind of like you mentioned, Jeff Boobles, getting up early, doing some exercise and something like that. But then also too, once I get to a certain point in the day, I need to shut it down because, if I try to work at night, the output is terrible. So it's just realizing that, and that you have to put guardrails on your life.
Yeah. Jeff Molesky, what do you do?
What were the three that you had said earlier, Boobles?
Oh, so I have like a three-prong approach. It's like mentally.
Yeah.
So like I listen to podcasts, books, different things like that. I'm trying to expand something spiritually. So I spend time in prayer or read the Bible, things like that. And then just physically. So usually running, lifting weights, something like that I'm doing. So
gotcha. It's really, because I think you and I talked about this a while ago, and I can't remember where we got it, but healthy, wealthy, and wise have always been like those three pillars for myself as well. So along the same lines as you, like I've always thought about those as foundational and healthy. Okay, I 7 to 9 hours of consistent sleep every night, ideally uninterrupted. I've ranted about this before, but people don't understand how foundational good sleep is. It's more important than a diet or healthy exercise. Period. If you're not getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, start doing that. And there's a lot of great research out there and tactics for you to look in there. But like you, Jeff, like I exercise first thing in the morning. It was one of the first purchases I made was my home gym. It's baller. You can all be jealous, but like that's my Zen time. So that's my health. Wealth. I've told people like I bust my ass so that I can make a lot of money so I can retire early and play video games. Okay. And I'm willing to make those sacrifices there because I want to have a decent income. I want to be financially secure and all that jazz. But then ultimately, wise. Like I do continuous learning. This podcast is one of the things that I like. Jeff and I were just talking. Like every time, I'm like, I want to quit. I want to stop. Like literally every time. But I force myself to do it because I know this is part of my continuous development. This is part of my continuous learning. So I like reading and watch the YouTube videos, just something that I'm continuously learning. And so those three pillars have always been mine. Healthy, wealthy, and wise is how I remember them. And I can't remember who came up with it, but I stole it, so it's mine now.
I think the health piece has become so important now from working from home because we fill up our schedules with meetings. We're not walking into the office or walking, across the building to get coffee. It's just like right there. So finding a way to fit that in has, I think, become really important for many of us sitting in our rooms all day in our chairs.
I mean, it's easier at a point because you'd be like, oh, I've got a 2-hour break. I can go do something. I can go for a run. Like I do that sometimes in the middle of the day, but you got to do it, like it's so easy to put that off and be like, oh, I could do this other thing too. I could also go stay busy doing something, and I think balance is what we talked about before. Like we don't have to work 9 to 5 anymore, or at least we shouldn't have to. Like we're doing stuff in the morning, we're doing stuff later at night times, we're doing stuff in the middle of the day. It's our hours are not the traditional anymore. I think that the world is changing and we have to be okay to do it.
That goes to what Tom was saying about the shutdown routine. When we first transitioned to COVID, I talked to a lot of employees who, had never worked remote before. And I hate to say this, but we know that a lot of times the reason businesses wanted people to come into the office was so they could see them. I see you sitting there. I see your computer on. Therefore, I'm watching you and you're doing work, which we know is a ridiculous way of measuring productivity. But what happened is, and you said it really well, it's a two-edged sword, right? Wow, I can actually get up and go do something cool. When we first started, everyone said that. Yeah, the opportunity is working home. You can go in the backyard. But what's reality? And I'll tell you, from when it really started until now, I think most people's reality is they book their meetings even closer together. You nod your head or smile at me if you've heard this. I don't even have time to take a bathroom break during the day. My meetings are so close together. This happens all the time. And so there's something about, now I don't have a boss supposedly watching me, but there's this unhealthy fascination with I have to be always on, always available, always. And so what you're saying about there's that opportunity to enjoy, yes, there is. And you have to create that. And so I think Tom's shutdown routine idea, that's what I was coaching people when they first were getting home and they were saying, I'm working, 14 hours a day because I'm not ending. Like, I get up to go have dinner and then I come back and I look at email and then there's IMs and then there's another meeting. And it's like you need a way to say, I'm stopping for a period of time. And I'll tell you, even myself, sometimes that's hard in the middle of the day, right? And I'm not saying steal time, but I'm saying you have to make sure that you have a healthy balance where I wouldn't think twice about getting up and going and talking to Casey if we were in the same office for 20, 30 minutes. I think I'm investing, I'm being a better employee because I'm doing that. But yet somehow in our minds, if I'm not glued to my workstation, just in case I get an IM or an email to respond instantly, I'm failing the company and they're going to think I'm terrible. When really, if I went for a walk and then came back and sat down, I'd have more oxygen, I'd be healthier, I'd be mentally ready to solve the challenging problems I'm being paid to solve. So there is that double-edged sword. And if you're not experiencing the benefit side of being able to work from home, work remotely, I would challenge you to find a way, work with your manager, work with your company, find a way to begin to experience that. Because without it, if you're just trapped at your computer for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, and you're not even having time to get up and go take a bathroom break, that's unhealthy and it's not sustainable and it needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
So there was something else that you were bringing up inside it there, Isaac, and I want to drill down into it and get your guys' thoughts on it. But I have found that interactions have become increasingly transactional. Like, I am only going to reach out to you when I need something or you need something from me. And like, to what you were just saying, like, oh, I need to sit in front of the computer because somebody might need me for something, not be like, when do you go shoot the shit with people again, right? Like, what happened to the water cooler conversations? What happened to the relationships that we're trying to build with each other, that we just, in a remote environment? Like, I think that's one of those things that we haven't quite yet overcome. You're all nodding norths and souths with me, so I'm assuming that you're seeing that same thing. But, Tom, like, what are some thoughts there? What is something to try and overcome that more transactional nature of what's going on today?
Yeah, that's a really good question that you bring up, Jeff. And what I've seen, I guess, at the company I currently work at, we actually have a weekly catch up where we do just that. We have a half an hour. We open up the meeting and just talk about, for instance, one of the people on our team is getting married soon. And he's from India, so he's actually going to be traveling there. So we were talking about that, where we just kind of talk about those things that, for instance, like what some of the people were going to do this weekend. So just, if you can block that time, I know that's tough. It's another meeting. But that's one way to get people to, still connect in our virtual world, depending on where you work and how people are, if they are coming back to an office or what that is. But that's one technique I've seen that works.
I schedule meetings with people and I literally label them virtual coffee. So they know this is just a social call. Like, I just want to see how you're doing. So they don't expect I don't put one-to-one or anything like that on there. Virtual coffee. And I have several of them a week just to keep those communication lines open and keep building relationships.
Alicia, what do you do?
I was just gonna say I actually did a post on LinkedIn about this to ask people, how do you recreate the water cooler scenario in the current context? And there was all these different ideas that people posted, and some of them were mentioned here. But I think you're right. I actually have a link also for a virtual coffee. I just invite. Yeah, I try to do that multiple times a week because I work for myself, so I don't have a team or a company. It's me and a few contract people that I work with. But I think the virtual coffee thing is the best way to just reconnect with people, and I make sure to do that on the regular.
One that a client of mine did recently was they did a beer tasting and they sent a kit home to every single buddy that was going to be a part of this. And then they had somebody from like this local brewery like facilitate it. It was pretty awesome. Like a lot of people say, well, we're going to do a virtual social hour. And then like after a while, no one shows up because it's like, oh, I'd rather go spend time with my family. But this was something everybody showed up and had a blast on. So I think there's options to do stuff like this in the future. We got to be maybe a little more creative and try some new stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we got to be intentional about it. It's something that we have to make time for. One tool that worked at a place I was at, they had Slack and they installed the app Donut, right? And all that did is everyone who's in the channel, it would just pair you, whatever the ratio was, right? Weekly, pair you with a random person and say, just connect with this person. And that was really helpful. And just being intentional about it. At the beginning of a meeting, put in, hey, let's check in as humans, right? Not checking in as colleagues or employees, or let's do a check-in as humans, right? If you're facilitating a meeting, make time for that. Be intentional.
I think also asking some deeper questions might be a good way to go too. A lot of times we just say, how's it going? It's like, that's so broad. Where are we going on this? Are we going to surface level? Or are we going deep here? Like, how much time we got? Like, and so if you ask a little deeper question, you'll get a deeper answer. And so I guess thinking about how you want to start that question might be something you want to consider as well.
I think that's an interesting concept, especially when you're looking at maybe doing icebreakers in meetings to make them more personal and ask a question for an icebreaker that gets deep, that allows people to really get to know each other, not just surface, not like, what's your favorite color, but like, what's
Yeah.
the worst thing that ever happened to you or the best thing that ever happened to you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, those are great ones. We had a workshop I was doing at a client recently, and we did this activity. It's a liberating structure. So another great facilitation technique called Mad T. And normally you would have like 2 circles and you'd get a new partner like every minute and you'd get a powerful question like that and you'd have to answer it like minute talk time shared. We just did breakout rooms we did 2 minutes because getting in and out is a little more tricky and virtual, and just asked that powerful question and did that. That was really like powerful for a lot of people because everything had been so transactional for so long that they finally got to go deep with some people, and then it inspired deeper conversations after that. So just another example of something you can do. So Alicia, I got a question for you. So I think facilitation is a superpower, and how do you see that superpower like lived out like in organizations where they're using facilitation really well? Like tell me a story about that. Like how have you seen facilitation just be like used as a superpower?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is a superpower. And I think that you can go, since in the work that I do, I frequently am coming into organizations and, sort of getting to know them initially. And so I can see when these superpowers are at play because people feel included, people feel like they can speak up, people feel like they can challenge something that is out there on the table without feeling like they're going to be let go or whatever. I mean, you don't see the toxicity in the organization. And to me, that's typically a function not only of leadership and in the culture, but also about how people facilitate bringing people together. And I think that it requires a toolkit of things. You can't, you need more than a hammer or a screwdriver. You need a whole big box of tools and different ways. You just mentioned liberating structures. The other day, I was working with a client and we were doing a visioning workshop, and they were just visioning the thing on the table was, what's your vision for agility? And they were getting stuck. And the facilitation I was using in that moment, they weren't getting unstuck. So I just pulled in a liberating structure right into the middle of that. And we just shifted gears and went straight to that. So that's an example of when you're doing something, it's not working, have something else you can pull out of your toolkit that you just flow right into the mix of things and free up, their thinking so that they can move to the next level. But what I see in organizations is safety and openness and transparency. And those are typically the signs that there's good facilitation and good leadership.
If you don't have that, how do you get it?
Well, you can start by coming to my track at the Agile Online Summit because the people that are going to be, I have picked a great group of people who will be sharing some interesting techniques, and they're very much focused on inclusion and diversity. So that's taking stock of all the wealth and beauty in the room or in the Zoom or wherever you want to have it, and bringing all those creative ideas to the fore. So there's going to be all these uh, track uh, speakers that are going to be giving great tips on how to do that. And that's why I wanted to have this track. I really wanted to have a facilitation track because I think it is so misunderstood, to your point, about how much of a superpower it is. So, yeah, come to my track.
And it's so key too now in this virtual world, right? Because all we're doing is facilitating in some way, shape, or form. And
Exactly.
I've seen it crash and burn so often because they don't have tools in their tool belt. They can't like gauge the health of
Right.
the session and where it's going and make a
One hammer.
change to make it better. Like just yeah, keep hammering. It'll go
That's
in.
right. Just keep hammering. One facilitation thing that comes to mind from what she just said is this idea of listening, right? If you're not listening at there's three levels of listening. If you're not listening beyond level one in your facilitation, you're not even going to know what tool to pull out, right? So you really have to be listening, and so that's um, one of those things to add to your toolkit is how do I level up my listening so that I know which is a good tool to pull in at any given moment when I have a team that's stuck.
And the concept of multitasking is so rampant and it detracts so much from what we're trying to do in a virtual world too. So I think it's important for people to understand the impact of doing that. Yeah, the phone or typing the emails or I had my coaching team try to practice level 3 listening for a week. Like you can't look at your email when you're in a call. You can't, start to type an email or do something else or talk to your kids or whatever, you have to level through and just keep track. If you get off track, that's fine, get back on and then let's talk about it. And it was so difficult for people when they were really intentionally trying to do that all week. Like I never realized how much I didn't actually listen.
Yeah, I would say that's another
Uh,
superpower, right? Facilitation and listening. We covered two right there. And it's a hard
yep.
one. Uh,
Yeah.
that maybe even gets harder in the virtual world. Definitely does. We have more opportunities not to listen for sure. Casey, tell me more about your track. So agile practices. When I first read that, I think practices are way less than behaviors, way less than structures. Why should I care about agile practices?
The track is designed to open up people's um, perception of what agile is and how it can be used to solve problems. So a lot of times what we see is it's just team level agility and it's dogma following and we're not problem solving. And so I've created this track to help people to be brave and be bold and to color outside the lines and really be intentional about choosing things and putting them into their environment and introducing change that helps to solve a problem, not just because a book told them to or a framework told them to, right? But really understanding the why. Why are we
Mhm.
doing this? And that's how if people you can help really bring change and make it stick, right? Because you have the foundational understanding of why we're doing something. A lot of times that's missing. And so I'm really excited to hear and let people hear the different ways that people have used agile practices creatively to solve problems.
So adding more tools to the tool belt, understanding why they should use one over another because there's a time and a place for certain things. Um, and I know another one that I would just I don't know. Whenever I'm coaching teams, I hope they get this is that there isn't one tool and they need to try a bunch of stuff you learn through doing, and the journey itself is just as important as the thing that you get at the end. So you have to try a bunch of stuff to know what's going to work for you and learn why it worked. So maybe there's some more examples there to figure out for yourself on your journey, right? If there's anyone listening here that's like, yeah, maybe that tracks for me. I think that there's a lot to be learned by just experimenting.
Yeah, that's what I'm hopeful of, that people will get some ideas of things that they can maybe go do, right? They can be, oh yeah, we have a similar problem. Maybe I can try something like that. Or maybe it generates a new idea of something that they've create that they want to try, right? That's
Mhm.
helping to solve problems because they hear the stories, right? And then you build alliances and you connect with people, and that's really, I think, too, the other important piece of this conference is the building those connections and networking and having it go forward outside the conference, not just ending at the end of the 3 days and being like, "Oh, that was nice." So a group of people came together, now they're all dispersing, but to find someone that you can connect with and bounce ideas off of and get maybe even coaching from, right, as you're experimenting with these new practices to solve problems in your environment.
How are you building those connections inside of the summit so that people get those connections? Because virtually, like I've been to a lot of virtual conferences, and that's lacking. You used to sit down and have meals with people, and you would share food, and you would share stories and contacts, and then you would follow up on LinkedIn, and then you would maybe meet up for coffee or things like that. And that doesn't happen near as much, I don't think, in these virtual conferences. So, how is the summit different?
Yeah, one thing I know we're doing. So this year we actually engaged a group that helps build engagement in virtual events. And so they put us through like an engagement workshop, and we have some things planned to help build in that networking. And then a few things that will help kind of bring people together. We're going to do some community building activities actually during the event. And there's a few things where we're going to actually put some things together as a group. There'll be some things, using Zoom, doing some breakout rooms, but there's a lot of things. And like we have a participation guide too that we're going to have where people can go and kind of see and take notes, but then build that conversation within like Zoom. And then we also have Slack as well. So there's a few different ways that we're trying to do that. And I know Casey and Isaac and Alicia have ideas too in their track, because I try to let people, build their track and build that engagement as well.
Yeah, I think there's the Ask Me Anything sessions too are going to be a good way for people to connect because these are recorded sessions, right? So it's not like you can raise your hand and ask a question. So in the Ask Me Anything time, people will get to interact with the speakers, and from there, build relationships and potentially take things forward as they find actions. And that's we're really focused on like what can you do with this, right? So day one, foundational sort of information focused on individuals and team level. But at the end of every day, we're going to ask, what did you learn today that you can take forward from here? And we're going to have a conversation about that with people, right? So we want to talk about, let's not just hear this. Let's find things that are useful and go put them into our environment. That's what we're here for.
And Jeff, I'll add to that and say, I think just like in person, but maybe the impact is multiplied in a virtual environment. But just like in person, you get out what you put in. And so if we were doing the Agile Summit in a location, you'd have to commit to, okay, I've got to go to that place. I'm going to be there. I might as well not look at my phone while I'm here. It's so easy virtually to show up. I just attended a large company's, keynote speech. I was doing 3 things during the keynote. Was I there? Yes. But I wasn't committed to the content. I wasn't committed to connecting. I wasn't committed to taking away. So I'll just tell anybody who's listening, this is true for any conference you attend, but especially the online summit. If you want to get the most out, what you need to do is you need to say, I'm going to actually set aside time where I'm going to turn off my other devices, my other distractions, and I'm going to press in. And then I'm going to show up to those Ask Me Anything sessions. I am going to log into Slack. I am going to ask questions and go to the sessions that Tom was talking about where you engage, because you can go to the summit and watch a couple of talks and leave. And that could be it. But if you really want to get the most out, if you want to suck the marrow out of the event and just really dig deep and get everything out, you need to be there, you need to be focused, and you need to be engaged. And the more you engage, I'm very confident the more you're going to come away with those connections, that great information, and hopefully an improved and changed mindset. So if those are the results you're wanting for this or any conference you attend, you've got to commit to put the time and the energy and the focus in. Otherwise, you'll come away. I heard something was playing in my headphones while I was doing 5 other things. So it's up to the participant as well. We're making options available, but you've got to come ready to commit and engage in those to get the most out of it.
You get out of things what you put into them. So that's a great life lesson, right? So we've been recording for quite a while. I guess at this time, I'd like to give each person just an opportunity. Is there anything you want to plug, promote, in addition to the online summit, since we've already talked about that?
I mean, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, I guess, unless we want to talk about my sports teams, which are in total contradiction to what Jeff Bubol's sports teams are. So I won't go there.
Casey, is there anything you'd like to promote to our listeners?
Not that I can think of. No, I just think if we're, having them leave this, listening to this with one thing, it would be that willingness to open to new ideas and to have that growth mindset constantly. I think that's the most important thing for us as people and as Agilists. So that's all I would say, I guess.
Okay. How about you, Alicia? What do you think? Anything you want to promote or to our listeners?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that my next frontier is emotional and leadership agility, and I'm really looking to and am connecting with employee resource groups, business resource groups. These are the affinity groups and organizations that are typically groups of folks that are underrepresented in management and leadership in whatever domain that is. And I'm doing keynote talks around positive intelligence and mental fitness. And so I'm looking to partner with anybody that would like to bring that kind of message into their organization. So they can connect with me on LinkedIn, Alicia R. McLean, and I'll be happy to connect with them and bring that message forward for them.
Thanks. Isaac, how about you? Anything you wanted to promote to our listeners?
Yeah, I love that you're listening to this, first of all, whether it's the video or the audio, because that shows me that you're in some way interested in learning. And so my number one piece of encouragement would be always keep learning. Don't ever stop. It's an ongoing journey. And second to that, a message I like to say to my teams and the people I coach and I work with is stay positive. I know there's a lot of stuff that could be negative. Don't get lost in that world. Stay positive. Look for the good in your situation. Look for things to be thankful for, because that's going to really take you the furthest on this journey. And lastly, find someone to connect to. Community is so important. And with us all working remote and all the COVID and barriers and restrictions, find someone that you can really connect with, whether it's virtually or in person, but make sure that you have those healthy connections, because that's going to keep you grounded. They're going to help you, and it also gives you the opportunity to be there and help them. So I just want to promote that, be a learner, stay positive, and stay connected. Things like virtual online summit, even meeting you guys here. This is a new connection for me, meeting you guys with what you do. So make those connections. Don't give up on people, right? Find people that are new for you, make new friends, and enjoy the journey. That's it for me.
Thank you for listening to the Agile Wire. We are consistently inspecting and adapting ourselves. We would appreciate feedback at feedback@theagilewire.com or on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play Store. See you next time.